And
Okay.
go back to all right. So for housekeeping issues, just so that we do keep our meeting nice and neat and that you guys can all hear each other, if you'd be so kind to use your raise hand function or the chat function for this meeting, that would be great. Excuse me. Yeah, raise hand button is up actually on the top bar of your, if you hover over the what looks like show participants, show conversations, that third one to the right is got a, you can raise your hand, give a thumbs up, that kind of stuff. So that's over there. Otherwise, stay muted. If we hear a lot of rustling around, we'll probably mute you if you can't do it. And on the phone, again, if you raise your hand, we can unmute you so you don't have to figure out how to do that from the phone. So welcome. It is already April 13th. It's hard to believe that we're already into April. The year is flying by like crazy. So housekeeping issues, Kelly, anything besides keeping everybody on mute and just knowing that this meeting is recorded and that we've got ability to record some of the chat features too. So go ahead, Kelly.
I just wanted to say people who are on a cell phone, in the beginning, I muted everybody, and people who are by cell phone, I'm not able to unmute. So
I think it's star 2, isn't it, to unmute?
I believe it tells you before, but I think it's star 6.
Is it star 6? Okay. All right. So otherwise we'll figure it out. So welcome, and as if you've been on last month's COG, you know my name is Abby Hendershot. I am now the executive director of MPART, took over for Steve Sliver, who's probably somewhere kicking his heels up. Maybe he's logged in with an unidentified phone number today, but we hope that he's enjoying himself for his well-deserved retirement. So Steve is on his way out, and we have a pretty packed agenda for tonight on different things that we want to talk about. So let's go ahead and get to it. A couple things that I just wanted to go through. We don't have any new members. Not a big deal because we got quite a few in the beginning of the year. We did have 2 people drop off of our membership just recently, and I think that was just a matter of schedules and stuff. So Brandy Crawford and Dan Bias, is it, are no longer members. All right, if you can go back to that. I'll do some quick agency updates just so you guys are all aware. Next slide, Kelly. There we go. So this was one I just wanted to make people aware. This is the PFAS exposure and antibody response to COVID. Pretty exciting. It is for the people who have, this is a subgroup of those people who are already participating in the MyPES exposure study. That would be the people in northern Kent County and Cooper Township or Parchment. So those people had already registered for that study. There's about 900 people in that study. They're looking for people to participate in this new exposure and immune response study to understand what the relationship is between COVID and PFAS and your immune system response to those 2 things. And so I think it's a really interesting idea. And I think the idea actually came from this COG. So that is underway. And I believe maybe I was talking with Sandy and she knew a couple of people that were able to participate, but I do believe that they've gotten, they do need more people. So if you know people in the North Kent area or Parchment, Cooper Township that haven't gotten their COVID vaccine, they just need you to come in a few days before you get your first dose, and then they will start monitoring the thing. So I think that's pretty cool, and I want to make sure you guys knew about it so that you could tell anybody else in your community or if you live in those communities, about this opportunity. So, and we'll probably get some more discussion on that maybe next month. I think that's on our agenda. So next slide, Kelly. Oh, the other big thing that I wanted to make everybody aware, this is kind of a kickoff event. So the first week in May 2nd through the 8th, we're going to have a drinking water awareness week. And it's going to have a whole variety of different topics each day of the week. And so I'm pretty excited about this. It's going to be done through Nina Sasse's Office of Clean Water Advocate within Eagle. And, you know, one day they're going to talk about private well construction. Another day we're going to talk about the potential for PFAS contamination. We're going to talk about lead for one day. There's a variety of topics each particular day, and we're working on putting together a short webinar for one of those days to talk about PFAS issues specifically. And it's something that we're kind of throwing together right now, so don't be surprised. I might call you to just be part of my webinar and help get that, you know, really touch the people who are out in our, you know, the regular people out in our state who might not have any. I mean, there are a few people out there still don't understand what PFAS is. So this is an opportunity to kind of give that, you know, base level education out for residents across our state. So there will be more coming on this. When I actually get a link to it, I will let you know. At this point, I'm not sure that there's actually a link out there quite yet, but it would get promoted out through all of our normal email blast channels. So the listservs, if you sign up for any of the webinar stuff through Eagle, that also would come through there. So just a heads up on that. What's our next things? So, okay. And I think we've got quite a bit of stuff to cover tonight, so I don't want to take too much time. So I think let's go ahead and get into the COG updates, and then I'm going to come back and talk on some of my understanding later on when we start talking about the charter and some of the processes. So why don't we let Ken and AJ take it away with their subcommittee updates. Ken, you want to go first?
I will. We had several meetings this past month, and we have come to some considerations that we want to bring forward to the COG from these meetings. The first being that we want to ask the COG to recommend to MPART that we implement an advisory notification to the public, and we ask specifically, or I ask specifically, for all PFAS investigations and any current PFAS investigations. This led to a lot of discussion on saying, well, there's going to be some times when there's not any drinking water wells impacted. We don't know, and right now, if we're just starting it, we don't know. But we've recommended that all efforts be made to inform the public that an investigation has taken place, and that if there is any concerns about drinking water wells, surface water contamination, those kind of things, that some kind of notice be developed. So that's going to be up to the COG to suggest that to MPART. We've given them a lot of feedback, and we've also offered our assistance in helping in that area. And I think the that first week in May, Safe Drinking Water Awareness, or whatever that's going to be, and the PFAS discussion will be helpful, because there has been efforts and recommendations made in the past to get some of this information down to PFAS, how PFAS might impact your drinking water well, even if you're not in an investigation area. So that's something we're asking the COG to consider. And then the other thing we asked the COG to consider is having our how do they want the subcommittee meetings to be handled? And today we have our meeting on the COG meeting calendar. So you can access that by going down to the bottom of the page of the COG meetings, and you click on it just like I clicked on this particular meeting on that same function. So that part of it is complete, and we have to somehow consider in the future, does the COG want our subcommittee meetings recorded? And if that's the case, where do we get those resources to do that? Because the state has to follow specific guidelines for ADA compliance and have anything that's recorded be subtitled so that it can be read by the visually impaired, or not read by the hearing impaired. So that's still up in the air, still for discussion. And how does the COG want us to proceed with being able to provide timely information? So that's kind of the subcommittee report. I know there's a lot of stuff on this agenda, but open it up, I guess, for questions now, Abby.
Yeah, Kelly, with the agenda, how much time did we have for subcommittee updates?
I think 10 minutes. I don't have that up. Sorry about that.
Okay. I was
I
just
have
wondering.
everything else up.
I do think, why don't we take, I think, Ken, it's an important topic. So let's go ahead and take 10 minutes and talk about it and see if anybody's got, anybody who might not have been on the subcommittee who's might have comments or questions about the recommendations. We can open that up to the floor so guys can raise your hands. So Lynn, yes. Hi, Lynn.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good.
I'm wondering, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we sure
Okay,
can.
great. First time that has ever happened. I am wondering about any sort of time frame for this. I feel like the subcommittee has been given a lot of work and it's very important. And so how important is it when we get to things like this, like public notification, and we have such a full meeting like this, right? How do we focus in on something this important and make these decisions so we don't let months go by? I'm not trying to put pressure on anything. I just know how it is when you have a packed meeting. And I wonder, that's a question I put out there because I think the best way we can follow through on what happened in Traverse City is to rectify that situation as quickly as we can and show them that what they experienced and this delay, we're concerned. We are citizens who are concerned about them and others, and to take that. So that's all. That's just kind of the gist of it.
Good question, Lynn. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Sandy, did I see your hand up?
Yes, and then I think somebody slapped it back down, but that's okay. I agree with Lynn. I think what Lynn brought up was just what I was thinking. There's seems to be a lot of moving parts, and I think it's important that we understand all of that and try and help provide a really good, solid approach that we can present to Eagle with that. And to do that, I don't know that we can do it in these meetings. Maybe it means that we have regular meetings of a core group of people that kind of come together with that. I would also hope that maybe MDHHS and Eagle and some other state agencies could also participate in some of that. So it could really be kind of a group effort, because I think there's things as citizens that we can teach agencies. And I think there's things that agencies can teach citizens. And if we can all just come in a room together, we can probably hammer this out. So that's my thought.
Thank you. Thank you, Sandy.
Abby,
AJ? Oops. Oh, go ahead, Kelly.
before AJ goes, I saw Tony's hand go up and down too, and I didn't know if the same thing maybe happened to him as it did Sandy.
Oh, okay. I didn't
Yes,
see.
you did. You
Okay.
did. Thanks.
I didn't do it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I just have a couple things to say. I think that it's really important, and I thank the subcommittee for allowing non-committee members to give some input at the end of their meeting just before this one. But I think it's important that some guiding principles be established. And frankly, I would have hoped that Eagle would have done that itself on this issue. And the silence there is a little bit perplexing to me, given what happened in Traverse City. But I think it's important that in making decisions in any particular case, that there be a guidance to Eagle MPART staff that it's important to place a priority on public health, that public health should be the driving factor in decisions that are made, with an emphasis also on the public's right to know about the risks that are potentially impacting their health. I think that if that overarching concept were to be applied in this and other instances within the agency, it would go a long way to addressing not only concerns with the agency, but also the fulfillment of the mission, which I believe the agency has to protect public health. And I think the second point that I would make is that in this process, that the agency's guidance to staff would be to view the members of the impacted communities as partners in whatever the process is that's going to be going forward in their particular community. Not because the community has to live with whatever decisions are made, but also the community has some pretty good things to offer. And a lot of things that have happened in the PFAS world, both in Michigan and elsewhere, have come not from the governmental agencies, but from citizens, some of whom are actually on this call tonight. The last thing I'll say for now is that I'm not really clear on what this process is going forward. I had suggested this before, and I'm not sure that it was particularly well received, but I really think that if this is a serious process of what do you do in various instances, that it would be really good to welcome public input particularly from impacted communities like the one that I come from in Oscoda that have been through this process, in our case, for a number of years. I think the same things happen in the Kent County area. So those are my thoughts. I just wanted to share those now. Thanks.
All right, good. Thank you, Tony. AJ's hands up.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can for right now.
Excellent. For right now, I'm not going to move. First of all, I just want to add, that I really appreciate the comments that have been made. We had a couple of questions and issues that were queued up that I think the whole COG should consider. The first one, and this seemed to be fairly uniform across the subcommittee, was that an investigation should be announced to the public immediately upon when Eagle has decided to investigate a site. And it's kind of tough to announce an investigation before then, but once the decision is made, even if there's not a lot known, I think the public has a right to know what is and isn't known, and I think I can realistically assess, yeah, we need to do some work, but at least they're aware and they can go out and take actions to protect themselves. There's a couple of additional questions, one being, at what point do we announce any geographic area that might be impacted? Another question is, do we limit such notices to sites that involve drinking water? And then the final is, are there any recommendations that need to be made with respect to, you may want to, you have these options, you can get a filter or you can get bottled water. And those last three questions, I think would benefit from, as Tony said, especially input from impacted communities. But the first one, to let folks know, to let the public know as soon as there's an investigation, I think is really critical. The second is kind of a procedural one, and you know, when we first started the subcommittee, there was only, I think, 3 members, maybe 4, and not a whole lot of interest. So we reported out, you know, from each subcommittee every month. But you know, I saw in the Traverse City Record Eagle that there, you know, were concerns that there had been secret meetings, and I just wanted to assure everyone on this call that there's been, you know, absolutely no such thing, and you know, we've taken the additional steps now of putting these meetings on the COG calendar so that not only every COG member, but every member of the public can listen in on the subcommittee meetings. And the third point is this: I'm reporting out on the Web Review Subcommittee. The state is continuing to update individual site pages, and in the coming months, they're going to be merging the areas of interest with the site investigations, so that there's no longer, you know, a separation of information there, and people can go just and look in one spot. And so I think that's going to be a significant improvement. Again, that's something we've been talking about for a couple of months. So that's all I had to say.
All right, thanks, AJ. And I will just say that I'm trying to keep quiet right now as far as my comments and specific things, because I really want to hear what you guys have got to say. You know, if there's certain things that are addressed to us, I think I want to hear from the whole committee here, the whole COG, and make sure that all of your concerns, I get all of your concerns and really understand those issues. So that's not to say that Eagle's hasn't already taken a lot of what you've said in previous COG meetings into consideration. We're tweaking things internally to try to see how quick we can get some of this stuff rolled out. But, you know, official processes and stuff, we're still looking at what's the best way to work those things. And so that's the kind of stuff that you guys are going to have a direct impact on for us. And we'll go through that a little bit more here in a minute. So, but I see, Lynn, you had your hand up and then you disappeared. Did you put your hand down, or are you still? Oh, okay. Lynn, you want to go again?
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to be very, very quick. Since you mentioned about the Water Awareness Week coming up, it would be a great idea, as Sandy had said, to work together with the Clean Water Ambassador Program. If there's a way, if we could maybe think about that for a future meeting, because they also have subcommittees designed for education and these kinds of things. I think we all want the same thing as citizens in there. I'm not going to go on. I think they could be a great resource in addition. There, okay. That's it.
Okay. Yeah. And I think, Lynn, I was hoping we could talk more about that specifically a little bit later in the agenda. So thanks for bringing that up.
Sorry about that. Okay.
No, that's
down I go.
You're on the agenda.
Mm-hmm.
I see Bob Pataki's hand up.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh, go for it.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. I'd like to welcome you, Abby, to this committee, and congratulate you on your new position. My comments are short. Basically, I finished reading the article in the Detroit Free Press about these felony charges against Rich Baird, the Governor Snyder's old assistant who handled the Flint problem. I think we all know that Eagle was created by the governor for the purpose of not repeating the problems that occurred in Flint. And that's very simple. You can't have government employees, you can't have Eagle, you can't have MPART holding back information from the public that impacts our health. If you have a measurement that shows that there's PFAS within a mile of my house, within the fish that are in the lake in front of my home, within the waters in that lake, I should know about it. And right now, I don't. I am greatly disappointed in Eagle since it's been established, because you are, my perception is that there's been more blocking than there has been progress, and the transparency simply isn't there. And it's a very plain and simple statement. As a new director, I hope you will take this organization and this COG in a different direction. Thank you.
Yeah, Bob, I'd like to follow up on what the types of transparencies, and maybe we can talk about this in a little bit, but thinking about where you think the greatest need, obviously sampling data, how do you report that in a way that's understandable for the public is really important, because, you know, just giving them a number doesn't really explain things to them. People don't understand what parts per trillion means to their health. And so, you know, it's a combination of communication, education, and transparency. And I think that's where I want to see this subcommittee, all these, you know, this COG committee actually work towards that. So those are some of my goals for the coming year. So Bob, we can talk more on exactly which pieces you think would be the first ones to start with.
It goes back to Anthony's basic premise that transparency, just show us the numbers. We're smart enough to eventually figure it out. But I greatly appreciate your open approach. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. All right. So thanks, Amy, for bringing this up. Any final thoughts on, before we get to the going back, hitting the refresh button on the charter itself, any other final thoughts or recommendations? I think to the timing piece that Lynn brought up, you know, this is an important topic, and I certainly don't want to make the COG feel like they've been rushed through this discussion or rushed through this piece of it. So if we need to put it back on next month's agenda, or if you guys want to schedule a separate meeting for this to continue the discussion, I fully think that that's a reasonable and a smart thing to do. But I'm going to leave it up to you guys, because it's your recommendations, and I want, you know, as fleshed out as you can give us to help us make those improvements is really what I'm looking for. So Ken, you've got your hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to thank all the new members of the subcommittee. After we've been asking for over a year for extra participation, as of March, we added 5 new members, and MPART allowed us and has given us the ability to listen in on 8 or 9 of the meetings that are held throughout the state when a site is being investigated or is being announced as a PFAS site. And that has helped us with some of the recommendations that we made. So I just want to say there is a lot of transparency, in my opinion, going on. And anytime I've listened in on one of those conversations or one of those meetings and had a question, someone from the state of Michigan returned my answer within 24 hours. So it's very open, in my opinion, going forward. Mm-hmm. So I want to, again, thank those new members, and we're here to help.
Okay. Ken, I'm going to, before you get off the line, throw it back to you. Do we want to, does this greater COG feel like they need to put this back on the agenda for next month so that a formal recommendation can be generated as far as something in writing, and to get to some of AJ's questions that he fleshed out for us as far as, you know, not only on making the public aware, but does it involve drinking water only? What kind of recommendations would you tell the public? What would that informational bulletin look like? Are there geographic boundaries as far as, if you don't have any data or you don't have any site information, do you just do like the block around that site, or do you do 2 blocks or a mile away from that site? What would be sufficient information or sufficient notice so that we can adequately, make sure we're really reaching people? And so I guess there's
a lot of pieces to that puzzle, because as we've talked, and as we talked about in the subcommittee meeting, recent examples to the Traverse City, and we knew that once we saw the document after last month's meeting that went to the airport, it was mentioned that there were drinking water wells that could be impacted. Now that went to the airport, and the airport probably didn't see a need to inform people, but the original letter came from Eagle, and that should have been a clue to 8 months previous to maybe send something out. So I agree, Abby, we need to sit down, work on, if you have us help, work on helping answer some of those questions. And I think your Safe Drinking Water Week, or the Safe Drinking Water Awareness Week, that could be a good thing for us to help you with, and go forward from there. And I'm not one to like to put things off, but if the COG wants us to come back next month and share more information, I'll be glad to share that.
Cool. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Ken. AJ's got his hand up.
Just real quick to echo what Ken said, we really encourage every member of the COG to participate in the subcommittee meetings, perhaps especially this month if we're going to be discussing this issue more. But I'd like to request maybe a little bit more time on next month's COG meeting to really have a discussion. There's a lot of folks on this call, and we've only heard from a few of them. So to hear the points of view on those questions that were kind of put on the table, because I think they're really important. And the answers may vary community by community. So I, for one, would really like to hear more about that and maybe have more time next month to talk about it.
Okay. That we can definitely do for sure. So, okay. Tony, I see your hands up. Oops. Tony, you can unmute yourself if you're good.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think there was a procedural question about opening up the subcommittee meeting. That I think should be addressed tonight. I hope that'll be done. And then the other question that I have in trying to understand this process is, what is Eagle doing at this point on this issue, and how does that tie into what these recommendations are or are being requested? What is Eagle doing on this issue? What is Eagle's position, and specifically, what is Eagle's position on if it were to receive a situation identical to the Traverse City one? What would it do at this point?
That's a great question, Tony. So let's get into that, because I was going to discuss that as part of the communication protocol that's down farther in the agenda. And so I think that's a really important question to, we're not ignoring this and waiting for you guys to make us the epic, recommendations that's going to solve all the problems of the world. We're all human. We're all trying our best to do everything we can. And we've got 7 agencies at MPART that are working really hard to ensure that public health is taken very seriously. And I can tell you, having gone through the problem with Flint and the issues that became of that nobody in any of those agencies takes that stuff lightly, and to withhold information from the public is is not what we do. So I will say though that there comes a time where there are some potential judgment calls, and that's where we are struggling, because in the case of if we're looking at East Bay, if we had to guess at the beginning of February last year about where we thought that plume was going to show up, or whether or not those particular houses were really at risk, we would have said no, they weren't necessarily at risk. We thought the plume would have been much farther south than what it was. And so we don't like to guess. We don't like, that's not really what we do. The public doesn't ask us to guess. And so it makes us very uncomfortable to not have that data to be able to say, no, here are the recommendations based on this data, based on our best available science. And so I want to be very, very careful about, the way we go forward. But with that in mind, there are certain steps we can take to help educate and inform the public. And one of the things that I'm thinking about is, how do we do broad-based education? How do we do, because PFAS is one small piece of the contaminant world. And if you were to go on our environmental mapper, I don't know if anybody here has ever been on environmental mapper, there are thousands and thousands of environmental sites across our state already. And so we really need to be holistic in our approach for education, for, like our charter says, we're informing, we're educating and empowering you guys as the community citizens to go out and help us get this word out, help us, reach those members of our communities who probably don't know what PFAS is. They don't know who Eagle is. They just know that they've got a drinking water well, or they've just got, this issue going on in their backyard or in their community, and they don't know who to talk to. So I think that's, as I understand it, not having sat through the last 2 years of the COG, but this is the whole premise of this COG and the formation of it, was so that we had people at the table who had been impacted, who understood what it was like to, one, wake up with a knock on the door or a letter in the mail that said, hey, we'd like to sample your drinking water wells. And then live through that saga of having to wait for more investigation and wait for those sample results. There's an emotional toll on that takes on people. And so I think you guys as COG members provide a really unique perspective that it's going to be hard to match anywhere else in the state. I like the idea of clean water ambassadors, but it's not the same as people who have bonded through that kind of shared experience of having, of being, people who have affected and been affected by PFAS and who have ingested PFAS because of your situations. And so I think I want to go back to the basics of the charter. And I know that it is, I'm going to mute you, Lynn, for a minute. I know if we go back to the charter real quick, Kelly, that that's what I'm kind of expecting out of this group. That's kind of what I'm hoping that we can get. I want to have this group be an advocacy body for MPART to say, okay, MPART might not be perfect, but they're really working their butts off to reach the public, to inform the public, and we're helping them to empower that public, because we can inform people to death, but we still have 1 million drinking water wells across the state that may never get sampled. And how do we educate those people? So those are the kinds of things that are going through my mind with the charter itself. And I guess I'd like to see if those are the kinds of things you guys discussed early on when you talked about the charter, or is there anything else that you wish could be included in the charter, or not that we're going to change it, but that you really want to make sure we emphasize as we go through this COG and really create a a really solid body of citizens who care. So Charlie, give me your 2 cents.
Okay, Abby, can you hear me?
I sure can.
All right. I have a question about the charter, and you may have touched on this in earlier conversations, and if so, I apologize for bringing it up again. But as people come and go on the COG, the question might come up again. When a COG member, I'll give myself as an example, attends a meeting on a contaminated site, is there any preferred protocol or information you would like us to give if we're either speaking or there on behalf of the COG, or alternatively, speaking or there on behalf of ourselves as a citizen who might be impacted by, in some way, shape, or form, by PFAS or related contamination?
So are you thinking like if you're out in the community representing MPART or at this meetings?
Yeah, I'm thinking about a meeting, if I go to, I'm up in Traverse City and I go to an East Bay Township meeting and I, speak as a citizen rather than, I put on my citizen hat rather than my COG hat.
Mm-hmm.
Just so that, people will know both at the meeting and on recording, I guess, what what position we were, what organization we were representing when we were engaging verbally.
I think that might be a great idea to be able to show the community that the COG members are engaged in their communities. So Kelly, what are your thoughts?
When we do our conference calls with the local officials or at the town hall meetings, we always have the citizen advisory work group slide. Maybe during one of those meetings, we could have a COG member, which all of our COG members are from impacted communities. They can both talk,
Mm-hmm.
trying to relate.
Mm-hmm. And I think though, if you get into a town hall or there are town halls in your area and you want to make a statement that would benefit, you're going to make a statement that is kind of from the COG's perspective. I think, we should definitely have you identify yourself in that respect. Hey, I'm Charlie and I'm on the statewide Citizens Advisory Work Group, and I think this is a great topic and I'd like to encourage you to do this and this and this because we found that it worked elsewhere or something like that. But yeah, we do introduce you guys on a couple of these meetings as we go through, but I think it's different when you actually have a speaking role. So Sandy, what do you think?
Yeah, I was going to say, I sit on the community advisory group and for the Wolverine site, and we've taken kind of a different approach because we've tried to be very careful at not mixing up our roles. And so it's one thing to go if you have gone under the assignment of I'm going to be a COG member providing, some kind of advice to a community on behalf of the COG, versus if you're going as a community member and saying things, because that could be two different things. And I think we have so many members on this COG and we have great knowledge and stuff, but I think we just want to be careful that we don't have somebody out there claiming to speak on behalf of the COG and perhaps saying things that maybe are not things that we've discussed or things that we've agreed upon, or it's just something to consider on that when you go forward. So I think it's okay to, for me, I would say I'm part of the MPART COG, but I may not say I'm speaking on behalf of MPART or I'm here to represent the COG. It's just a subtle difference.
Yeah, that's an important clarification, Sandy. I appreciate that. That's very true. Very true. Charlie, you got a follow up?
Yeah, thanks, Abby. I think it's because COG members may be in their communities, in their impacted communities, they may choose to speak up about things that aren't really in the COG's domain. The COG has a very specific domain that it is responsible for, mainly related to communication and information and education. And it's entirely conceivable that as a member of the public, I could go to a meeting and I could spout off on all manner of things that are of importance to me related to contamination in my community that have nothing to do with the objectives of the COG. And so I would, we don't have to solve this tonight, but I think it would be useful to have some kind of guidance either internally developed or given to us by MPART on how to conduct oneself in such a situation. I can see myself being in that situation.
That's a good question. Like you said, I don't think we'll solve that yet tonight, but I think there's some, I think what I do want you to do is I do want you guys to feel empowered to be speaking with your communities, be speaking and telling people about not only about the COG and about MPART, but about PFAS and just that education that comes from grassroots efforts. So, yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Charlie. Tony, I'm going to give you the floor and then we're going to move on to the next slide.
Okay, I'm still not sure we've resolved where we're going on the recommendations and the COG issue or the subcommittee issue, and I hope that we get to that before the end of the night. I do want to address a couple of things on the charter because some of us were involved in drafting that, and too often there is a presumption, at least in my experience, from the state agencies, and there's certainly that perception that there's kind of a presumption of ignorance within the public, which I think is overblown. And it comes across as if somehow Eagle is bestowing something upon this community that Eagle has and the community doesn't. I think that's a mistake. And I think it's important in the language of the charter to focus on the fact that we are here to advise MPART on establishing a dialogue, which means a co-equal partnership in my reading of the word. I think it's also important that this group is here not to go out and bestow, wonderful things on other people, but to also provide input to MPART from the communities back. And this was something that was a topic of a lot of discussion in the early going. And so I hope that emphasis is not lost as we move forward. And I just want to bring that, Abby, because you're coming in new. We have had this discussion before, and I think it's important.
It's actually on our last slide, Tony. So I'm going to call you back here in a couple of slides and have you give me some examples. So thank you for that. Thank you for that. Okay, let's go to the next slide, Kelly, because I feel like I'm probably running out of my time. So yeah, so I think, what we're looking for obviously is that using this COG to be a sounding board for process improvement. There's never a perfect process. There's never a perfect agency. We're all human, and I expect that we will all try to continue to get better. So, and then, we're all working towards solutions. So if we can identify concerns, we want to focus on statewide. So one of the other things that I think somebody brought up, and it might have been Sandy, it might have been a conversation with Sandy, talking about making sure that our conversations and our solutions are equitable so that, one community is getting something that's equitable compared to another community as far as their needs, their education, or whatever might be needed for PFAS. So I think that's a really important piece of it. And then just open communication. And we have to do that in a variety of ways, because not everybody understands where we're coming from. We don't have the same backgrounds. And so that open communication that seeks to understand is the basis. And I think that's what you were getting to, Tony. So, all right, next slide, Kelly.
So next we have Lynn McIntosh. She was actually supposed to go first,
Oh,
but
she was supposed to go first. Okay, we'll have Lynn jump in here, and I think,
Yep.
Lynn, you were going to provide some member perspective, and then I think we can talk about, and actually, I think I was going to have you say a few things about your role as the Clean Water Ambassador as well. But Lynn, you want to jump in?
Okay. Oh, there I am. Okay. This is the first time I've used this thing. I had thought of showing a few slides, but I don't know how to do it. Never done it before. And I had sent them to Kelly ahead of time. And if we don't have them, we don't need to show them.
I can bring them up if you'd like. Yep.
Yeah, just for a minute. It just break the mood for a minute. Okay. Because I think all of us, besides it gives a different focus, and I don't necessarily go on and on. I don't want to spend too much time. I really appreciate, first of all, Abby, that we've had so much discussion. That has been one of my, in the past, sometimes I felt there were more presentations than there was time for discussion. And in terms of recent communications among the CAG members, I actually printed off like all these comments from these emails from Charlie and from Bob and Teresa and Mary Blanchard and Connie Boris. And I'm going, wow, this is great. I like to go back and reread these emails. I like to go back. I went back, well, also, I have a lot of free time. I broke my shoulder, but I came away after reading these emails and looking at, listening to the last meeting. It's like, wow, I am so grateful to be part of these citizens on this group. And it's really important to me, I realize, that we stay together and united together as much as possible. I think that groups don't necessarily grow systematically. I think they grow organically. And it's a little bit more like in the early stages. It's a little seedling popping up out of the ground. You don't want to trample it and scrutinize it too much in the beginning. It needs to grow. And what made me want to share tonight was that I was very troubled by what happened at the Traverse City in terms of the reporting of that situation, because I'm like, wait a minute, I want people at the Record Eagle to know that we're citizens and we care. And the 8 months delay, we care about that. We're not brushing it off. And it really was disappointing to me to see it implied that there was any sort of secrecy on the part of a subcommittee that's just getting going. I wrote an email, and I'm not going to read much of it, but what I gleaned when I listened to the March 9th meeting was that we have members that are intelligent, compassionate, that the notification delay was soundly questioned. And if there was any secrecy, it was an honest oversight that the committee was glad to amend. So I don't know. I'm not going to go back and say what this, what that, what how. But I want to say to the group, I want us to grow together. I would love to meet you. I love the fact that some of you have taken the time. Charlie put together a wonderful perspective, which I enjoyed reading and rereading. So I think there's great possibility for this group, and I hope that we can be unified and also move somewhere. So here's a little of my story. This is my river in Rockford, Michigan. You can see that, right? Okay. And the swans, those two swans there, they're the ones who started my story. They brought me to the river. They showed me ultimately that there was a filmy, weird substance refracting or making the light absorb. And then I finally came to me that, wow, all that stuff down at the Rockford Dam is nasty foam, and it was a long journey. But I started, I think, like a lot of you, with a love for water and human health and the surface water and the groundwater. So let's go to the next slide. The next one's interesting. Okay. When I gleaned everything and I thought about our Citizens Advisory Group and what we want to communicate to MPART and work with them on an Eagle is never confuse movement with action. Okay. Now, these are my swans. I've taken lots of photos. I loved watching my beautiful synchronized swimmers over there. You know, the two swans side by side going up the river. Lots of beautiful photos. But that's not action necessarily. You're traveling somewhere. But sometimes there needs to be action. Now, that other photo, I'm going to show you a close-up in the middle, is how I felt, finally, regarding, here it is. I saw a swan rise up and take this goose and smack right into it. And the goose's head is above trying to, jump down on the swan. It was an amazing action photo. I took it from quite a distance. But that was me, really, after 8 years and 8 months, trying to expose the Wolverine PFAS crisis. It was an 8-month delay, followed by 8 years of all-out fight, trying to get anyone to listen. And unfortunately, back at that time, not with the present staff, but I had to heave boulders out of the way, and I was not getting much help at all from my city or my legislators or from the Eagle. It was hard. And I'd like to share this with the group because I think it's important for perspective. When PFAS broke in 2017, I actually refused to speak to the DEQ because I had had it with things going policy up towards the company. Let's give them time. Let's do this. Let's do that. When I found out that and this is a true thing, so I'm going to say we got to speak the truth. This is my experience. When a FOIA request from a reporter is given to a company before the reporter gets it, that's pretty bad. And when a company gets all this extra time and there's an 8-month delay as a result, that's a real problem. So I got to the point, and I share this because it's not the same now, whereas I ended up I talked to the health department, and then I told the DEQ they could FOIA, from the health department. Now that's a pretty strong reaction, but that's where I was after this. And then came a turnaround when things changed downtown in Grand Rapids, and Abby and Karen Vorse and Mark Worrell came in, and I was so impressed with, at least I was a different perspective. People were listening, they were caring, they were following up, and it improved. And then when MPART came about, especially the second time when it's now put under Eagle, I thought, okay, this is our chance to work together. We all come here from perspectives that each of us has a sad, hard story and a fight and a disappointment. And for us to be able to have this opportunity to spare other people by working well together is phenomenal. So I really am pleased. And I don't like groups, by the way. I've always been a non-group person. But I see the potential here. Now, I just to leave, my last little slide is the many moods of groups, of swans and groups, like that swan over there reflecting in the water. There's action there too. Taking time to ponder and think. Like some people here I know who attend these meetings, I don't necessarily hear from you, but I know you're thinking well and hard, and I see that in your emails. And we want to hear from everybody. And then sometimes, like those other two swans, it looks like they're going in two different directions, but not necessarily. I mean, there's still ways to work. And I think sometimes with that third picture, with the swan with the fuzzy on his nose, we have to be able to also let down a little bit and give each other the benefit of the doubt. Take the time to call somebody up on the phone if you want to talk something out. But let's be careful how we represent ourselves, especially to a media that may not have the whole picture, and that's not their fault either. But we want these people in impacted communities to know that we care, and that's why we're part of these citizens. And it's not just a matter of letting them know the COG exists. It's also, last thing, welcoming the new members. People come when they have questions. I think it'd be great to have one of us welcome the new members in a way, even in a private phone call to say, hey, I'll answer some of your questions. There's not time to do it in the meeting, but I know they're looking for support. I read that in the emails too. So there you go. It's a bit of a perspective, and I would love to see us move forward so that we can take decisive action, ultimately, not just be moving and talking. I'm done. That's about all I have to say.
Perfect, Lynn. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. Anyone want to reflect on what Lynn said or offer feedback? Because I think that's what I'm hoping for. I realize that I haven't been a part of these meetings. You know, I have of Sandy's and Ken's Citizens Advisory Group for Wolverine for the last 2 years, I guess. But I think it's important. We have power here as a Citizens Advisory work group to shape and influence, and we are, you know, one of the few in the country that are really poised the way we are to have not only really good and comprehensive data across the state. Not saying it's complete, we've got a long ways to go yet, but to be able to influence what happens both at the state and national level on PFAS. And so I'm not saying we always have to agree, but there should be a level of respect that goes with any community group. And I hope that if, you know, we have disagreements, which are always going to come up, that we can talk them through in a professional manner and have good respect with each other, because we do need to be, you know, we need to be honest, but we don't need to do that in a way that beats each other up. So that's my hope for this group, because I have a lot, honestly, I have some really big dreams for you guys on what I'd like to see you guys do. And one of them is like some really serious educational outreach for, let's establish how do we network out there and get not only PFAS, but get some sort of educational pieces to our million drinking water wells across the state. Because one of my personal issues is that I can't tell you how many times we've gone through the different urban centers and said, oh, well, everybody's got municipal water. But then we find somebody who either wasn't required to hook up, or they did hook up, but they don't have enough money to pay for the water bill, so they still use the stab well that's in their basement. And those things happen more than you would think. And those are the people that are really at severe risk. If you're in a downtown or a city industrial urban area, you're going to be at some significant risk for groundwater contamination. So I think we're poised to do some really cool things. And so I'm just going to leave it at that for now, and we can move on unless anybody's got any questions or thoughts along those same lines. All right, let's go on to the communication protocol then, because this is where I wanted to talk. Tony wanted to know what was being done right now, and our current communication protocol starts for us as soon as we know we're going to collect groundwater samples. So that's when we start reaching out to, you know, maybe we've sent that letter, or maybe we've sent, or we're, you know, we've got an orphan site. We have a ton of orphan sites across the state. And by orphan, I mean those sites that don't have a responsible party. So it could be a site where you have an industrial facility where they're out of business, they've gone bankrupt, they were there 20, 30, 50 years ago, but there's some historical legacy of contamination based on that. And so In my world, we call those orphan sites because that ends up falling on the state to, you know, undertake the cleanup and or investigation, and definitely evaluating the potential risk to public health. And so that all starts, you know, we start our communication protocol right in that beginning box of, if we think we're going to need to take groundwater samples, then we'll start notifying local public health. That's what LHD is, local health department. DHHS will start talking with, and as this pink box says, continuous communication with local health department is essential because they have a lot of the well log information for residential private wells. Department of Health and Human Services is there to give their input for communication with the public, doing public health one-on-ones if people are concerned about things. And then, but we kind of do that whole first tier of protocol is all kind of going on at once. So we're having those initial conversations with, and sometimes, you know, we will have conversations with not only local public health, but local officials, townships, cities, you know, different parts of the cities we're informing on some of our actions that we intend to take. So, but usually we don't start working with the public until we get farther down the road. So you would take and actually get a sample, and then you would throw it up on the MPART site. So your site lead's going to schedule a meeting with your regional lead, and then we're going to reach out to not only our local officials, but our legislative, you know, representatives. And then get them in the loop so they know what is going on, so that when they get the questions from the public, they know how to answer them. And then we would go ahead and do a town hall, which I think maybe it's on the next slide. So this is a very busy slide, but basically what you're getting to is, and we've been doing those very quickly. So the last couple of meetings, Tony, have been very, very quick. Before we even get to sampling, we've done the local official call one day, and then within the next week, the town hall happens so that we can answer any questions. The next week, then the sampling happens so that people got the information ahead of time. The sampling goes on, the local officials know. So we're trying to do that in a very tight time frame. And a lot of that was based on the comments that we've had from this group for the last couple of months. How do we speed up that process? How do we make sure the public's involved? And so I think the town halls are really one of the best ways to do that. I think figuring out a way to make sure people hear about it is still an issue. I think we could use some better outreach on that. It gets to, you know, we let the townships know, we let the cities know, we let the, you know, and the people themselves are getting either letters or they're getting phone calls from us, but we still don't get everybody. And that's one of our key things I'd like to be able to work on. So, but Kelly, if you can go back to the first slide, because really what you guys are talking about for us is creating a communication protocol that would go on before this groundwater sample is even collected. So before anything is even done, what you guys are actually, you know, suggesting, and I think there's certain circumstances where it's definitely warranted that, you know, we actually come up with some sort of protocol that would happen before any samples or any data is actually had for the site. And so I think that's going to require some careful consideration. We are working with over 100 different project managers across the state. We've got probably another 40 different toxicologists across the state, and we've got 7 different agencies. So it's really important that we put this protocol down on paper so that it's clearly laid out, that people can follow it and they can say, okay, I know what to do. Here's what it is. This is the way we're going. So I just wanted to share this with you because this is what we have for right now, but we are trying to speed up that process, you know, with the understanding that in some cases, you know, that process seems to have been taking too long. We are speeding it up so that it's not, you know, there's not any real lag time in between the different pieces of this. And so we're getting the you know, the town, as soon as the town hall goes live, it's live on the website, people can get the information. And by that point, they've already actually probably gotten their letters requesting samplings. So Lynn, question.
Yeah, I just have to put this out. You have to remember too that all towns and townships are not created equal. And there are towns that are not going to take it seriously. So if you're really, I put that out for everyone to think about. I wasn't protected by my town. I was actually thwarted by them. And so I think there's this general understanding that this is how it works in the townships and the town and the city. And that's not really how it always works. It does sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But I just put that in how we doesn't always get to the people.
Well, that's a good point, Lynn, because we've actually had some township officials, some city officials going, oh, I don't want you telling my people this. We can't do this. We can't. And we're like, no, we really do. This is part of our process. They need to know. There's nothing to be afraid of with data. The fear comes with the not understanding what's being done or not knowing. So I think, you know, we've had those conversations where the local officials, you know, because it's a big step for some of these little towns. They don't know how to react and they don't have staff to react. So I think that's a good point.
Well, it's just more than that too. It's stigma. They don't, the Chamber of Commerce gets in, the politics gets in, and they will thwart efforts. They don't want their town. They don't want this out. So it's not even just fear. Mm-hmm. So not every town's that way, but there are some. So
yeah, exactly.
Just for the mill. All right.
That's a great point, Lynn. Thanks. Mm-hmm. Tony, what's your thoughts?
Well, yeah, it's a question and a clarification. So this is the protocol that it has existed and did exist at the time that the Traverse City letter was sent in February of 2020.
Yeah.
My question is, in the interim, and I'm not sure again what this is all looking like, either internally within MPART or where this is going to go with our group. But in the interim, what is Eagle doing now? Is it just continuing to follow the existing protocol at this point and not making any changes yet?
No, we are looking at every single case in specific circumstances. So we're taking each site, looking at it individually and saying, okay, you know, we don't have a groundwater sample here yet, but what do we know about the site? Can we make some assumptions? Do we have enough information to know that people are at risk? And so we're starting to push things a lot quicker so that, you know, in some of those cases, we might have waited for a liable party to get that data. Because I think that's one of the really key points that needs to be understood is that under state law, under Michigan Part 201, the responsible party that caused the contamination has the obligation to define that contamination on-site and off-site. And so if we wait for the responsible party, if we waited for the airports, if we waited for, you know, whatever manufacturing or chrome plating place, whatever, we wait for them to do the necessary work to get that groundwater sample, to define that plume off-site, or to sample residential wells, we could be 5 years down the road. You know how that goes, Tony. So that's the part where we're looking at it from MPART and saying, okay, what can we do to kind of supersede that process so that we can take a better care of public health and let the normal process go on and kind of take care of that piece of it up front. Because, you know, residents shouldn't have to wait 2 years, 5 years, whatever, for a company to get their investigation done. And it can easily take those. That's not an unusual time frame. So I think we are looking for those kinds of solutions right now in-house, Tony. I can tell you we've had many, many conversations in the last 2 months based on these discussions in the COG on where are there efficiencies, how can we tweak this process, or create new processes. So the kinds of things that you guys are talking about in the subcommittee are the recommendations that we're looking for, is how and when do we make this available? And so I think we're looking at every site that comes to us with a different lens than we did, say, a year ago. And so, you know, I'm not going to get into specifics quite yet, but there are, in addition, there are additionally going to be updates on our website for some of, we got some drinking water updates coming out. We're trying to get as much of the data onto the website so you guys have got it, so that you are, you know, one, that we're being transparent, two, that the industrial users or industries across the state, that data is out so you guys can evaluate that too. So there is quite a bit going on behind the scenes, and I didn't come with a specific long list, but
Sure.
I'll bring a list next month because you know, there's quite a bit that I'll be able to tell you, put on that list for next month that we can go through specifically about how we've not necessarily changed this protocol, but maybe instituted additional protocols to make sure we get that public notification piece of it done. And I just think that it's a really important piece of it. I don't know, it's not always easy. I mean, it takes some significant resources to do, but I do think it's important. So did that answer your question, Tony?
Well, just as a follow-up, in part, yes. As a follow-up, two things. First, I commend Eagle for, even in Traverse City, for jumping in and doing the work when the responsible party did. My question at this point is, are you still waiting until you have data before notifying people?
We are considering, it depends on what you mean by data. So that's the other thing. In this protocol, we have, we were waiting for a groundwater sample. But I think there's many ways to interpret the data. So that's what we're considering right now, is what other pieces of data could we use to make determinations that public notification is needed. And
Okay.
so that's the discussion we're having right now.
Okay, so there still isn't a focus on, for example, when that letter was sent in Traverse City, and I'm using that just because it's an example, and I think it will help to inform this group in terms of making recommendations. But at this point, if another Traverse City occurred and the letter were to go out, like the one that went out in February of 2020, Eagle would not notify those surrounding homeowners. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct. I think that's exactly what we're anticipating doing. But we're coming up with that protocol right now. I think that's what, you know, that's what we've been talking about for the last couple of months. We hear you. And I think that's exactly what we're trying to figure out, is in what circumstances it is absolutely necessary to do that, and how do we do it. So, because I don't, you know, the worst thing you can do with a big organization, a big collaboration organization like this, is to make sudden changes. But we are nimble enough in certain circumstances to be able to do that. And so I think we've got a couple things on our plate right now that we're working on, that we are going to come up with an additional protocol for informing residents. So I will say it's in the works, Tony. So I see Ken's hand is up. Ken, did you want to add your 2 cents in?
I'll add more than 2 cents. No,
Okay. Give me a quarter.
All right, here's the quarter. First, I want to say that the observations about getting information to the public after the testing has proven that there's a problem, using Gogebic Airport as an example, that happened really fast after it was announced that it was a PFAS site.
Mm-hmm.
However, it took several months before it was announced to be a PFAS site. So when I listened to that conversation, I flashbacks of Traverse City, Cherry Airport kind of sunk in, and I know that's water over the dam or PFAS over the foam or whatever it was. But the reality is the responsible party gets involved in having to do the tests. That clearly is going to be a delay potentially. And that's why I just want to reinforce whatever protocol we end up, or what end up getting suggested by the COG to Eagle, MPART, for earlier notifications just becomes that much more essential. And you guys do have some resources, because I sat through the new mapping protocol or program that you've got. You got WellLogic. Some of those kind of things can be looked at really quick, in my opinion.
Yep. And those are our tools that we use to do like desktop audits and get a general feel for, okay, where are the water wells? What information do we have? And so, yep, that's the stuff we would definitely be using.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Lynn, your hand is still up, and I want to make sure that I get everybody before I move on from this particular slide. Anything else, Lynn?
No, my hand's down. It meant to be down.
Okay, you're stretching. Okay, that's good. I see John is a guest. John, you have the floor. If you want to unmute yourself.
Hey, I'm a new member. Can you hear me?
Sure, John. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm trying to learn, but I enjoyed listening to back and forth here. But one question I have is, in your organization, if you see something possibly having, a significant impact, do you have the ability to go and sample it without going through the, responsible parties and things like that?
That's a great question, because we do, as long as we have the resources to go do it. So as long as we have the money and the staff to go get it done, then yes, we can do it outside of the Part 201 process. What the problem becomes is if we do a significant response to evaluate a neighborhood, say next to an airport or something like that, if we don't give the liable party under Part 201, this is just one of those little niche things, but under 201, if you don't give the liable party the opportunity to do that work, then we can't go back and cost recover for those funds that we've spent at their site. And so it's a balance between our fiscal responsibilities and public health. And of course, public health is always going to win. So any money we may spend sampling those wells, hiring a consultant to go sample those wells or whatever we do, is something that we have the opportunity. And as long as we have the money, and usually we dig it out of some fund or another, but it's not something then that we can go back and charge that company for because of the way the law is written. So usually we try to push all of those fiscal responsibilities on the liable party, on that party that's responsible for the contamination, because it is what we call polluter pay legislation. But if in the time that it takes to respond to those things, it can drag out for quite a long time. And so as you guys have, made very astute observations, we don't always have that kind of time to wait for them to do their obligations, do that investigation, because we've got to balance public health, and that's got to come first.
So as a follow-up, then I don't know if it's a secret or is it a public knowledge of how much budget you have for standby activities like that.
It's not a ton, but we get, every Eagle gets a department budget, DHHS gets a department budget, MPART as an collaboration structure, does not get a budget. So we work with our existing Eagle budgets and DHHS budgets to make sure that we've got sufficient funds to do some of this miscellaneous sampling. But that's why we make sure it's done judiciously, because we've got to we don't have so much funds. And so we want to make sure that those funds that are spent are being done for the protection of public health.
Right. I mean, just the priority and timing hangs on that. If you have the ability to respond, go out and sample right now instead of waiting, months or years, that makes sense in terms of protection of the health, public health. So, but anyway, thank you.
Okay, thanks, John. Yep, you're absolutely right on that one. Absolutely right. So Ken, another comment? Or your hand's just up still?
I don't have a comment. I thought I took my hand down. So.
Okay, just checking.
All righty.
Lower it for you. Wonderful. Okay, Kelly, I think we had one more slide after, maybe two more slides after this, but let's go to the next one, community feedback. So all you people who have been on this phone and been so nice and quiet, here's where I want to hear from you guys. So we threw some questions out here because I do want to do a little bit of a roundtable. I want everybody to have an opportunity to talk. But has anybody participated in any outreach events where you've either talked about PFAS or been a part of a citizens group, or any other kinds of outreach events that you've been, any recent lessons learned from meetings or other kinds of investigations that you've been, or any other recommendations? So this is kind of where we want to hear from you guys on your feedback that you've maybe discerned over the last month, 2 months. And so if you have anything you want to share, that would be great. Positive, constructive would be helpful. Things that we can chew on and help to implement. So anybody want to be brave? This is going to be a very quiet group.
Well, pandemic.
There we go. Shelley, thank you. You get to be our first guest. Thanks.
You're welcome. I think I've stated this before, but I'm planning on reiterating this repeatedly until something comes of it. But that presentation that we received on how the process goes for sites where there's water impacted, where drinking water is impacted, that presentation that we were given at the last COG, I believe it was the last COG meeting, was just really informative and very beneficial to understand how Eagle is handling all of those sites where drinking water is impacted and how they're processing them, and what that, for lack of a better word, what that flow chart looks like, what that decision tree looks like. And I asked for there to be a possibility of a similar presentation to be given, to be put together on sites that are not impacted by where the drinking water was not impacted. So perhaps where there's landfills, in areas where there's city drinking water and there's no wells, things of that nature, where there's no drinking water impact. So, and I understand that those are a lesser priority because there's not that drinking water impact. So there's not necessarily that health advisory at the moment. But to understand how Eagle is triaging those, how they're processing those, what the decision tree looks like, and what the accountability looks like, because many of those sites perhaps are being handled differently and being held accountably differently, and no one knows whether they are or are not being treated fairly or justly in accordance with how everybody else is being treated, and it's creating a lot of buzz, I guess, amongst those sites where there's very clearly not a drinking water impact. And so I'd really like to see some clarification from Eagle on how they're triaging that, how they're processing those, what their decision trees look like on how they're deciding how frequently they have to sample, how soon they're requiring them to put in systems for remediation, what kind of accountability they're holding them to, because it's extremely unclear to those of us in the industry on how those are being handled. So I'm just going to continue to push for that until I see something, because that's the transparency that I'm looking for. Thanks.
Okay. And you're talking specifically, Shelley, under Part 201?
Yes, and specifically for those areas that are not impacted by drinking water. I have no issue with how the sites with drinking water are being handled. You guys, obviously those are of higher priority and our health issues, and I totally get that, and I totally respect that. But there are a number of sites where there is very clearly not a drinking water issue. And those of us who are handling those sites need some clarity from Eagle on what the standard is that we're being held to for sampling and for remediation in comparison to what other sites are being handled and being held to, so that we understand and feel like we are being treated justly and fairly in accordance with how Eagle is treating everyone else.
Question, Shelley. Okay. Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think we can talk about that. Excellent. Other thoughts, questions, any other lessons learned or outreach? Patty, how you doing?
All right. First of all, thank you. I appreciate being a part of this group. And as for participating in any outreach events, we have one coming up on Monday. I'm part of the Cascade Township contamination area, and we call ourselves now Safe Water for Cascade. And I just want to say that I really appreciate having all of the agencies surround us with their knowledge. We're going to have a little PFAS 101 slide presentation, and that I think is going to be really, really helpful for people. I've seen it many times, but that's okay. I think that it's just really important to get that out there so everyone has the same basis of education. As for lessons learned, we'll probably have some after the meeting, but I just want to say thank you to MPART, Eagle, and all the folks who are going to help us out on Monday. Thank you.
Thanks, Patty. Yep, I will be there, as will a whole lot of other people on that team, giving you support on that one too. And that's a good example of one where we've got the bigger town halls, but in this particular case, we're coming at the request of more of a neighborhood association, neighborhood meeting. And so it's their meeting, and we're coming invited, and we're going to give them some information and whatever else, other questions that they have. And so I think that's, another way that we're trying to do that, reach out to people and meet them where they're at, type of things. So. All right, other questions or thoughts? All right, next month, I've got two things before we go. Well, we got one more hand. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought I had my hand up. Just areas of concern, having sat through some of the meetings, and the one that really kind of got me was when the township supervisor, who had never been on a conference call or a Zoom call or a meeting on a computer, he was staring at the screen and he said, "What the hell do I do now?" And from there, we got some suggestions that for people who aren't in this game a long time, a lot of acronyms were flying around that the people would not necessarily understand, especially if they ended up in a town hall meeting, but even in this case with that several people on the phone. And then the information that was provided was very technical. When asked what the plan for the future was, Eagle's answer was we would be semi-annually sampling or monitoring. And that may be good for that particular site, but it might not be appropriate for other sites. And at the end, the question was asked, what's next? And from the local leaders, and it was a vague response. So those are just some of the things that we picked up on in those meetings. And I think that the acronyms and the technical stuff is really important, and clearly what's going to happen next.
Mm-hmm. That's a good.
Okay.
That's a good observations, because we do get quite the wide variety of people on these calls. Some people are very technical, they understand all of it and they want more, or they want more technical. And then we get the other end of the spectrum on making sure that we don't use the acronyms, because people have no idea what we're talking about. So yeah, definitely a big issue there. Other thoughts before I move along? And I do want to point out that on this call, we've got Sue Menente, who is our DHHS, one of our public health educators, and she does a good job in helping us with trying to tone down our slides so they don't sound so technical, and making sure that we're trying to speak in plain English. So I'll give a shout out for Sue and her crew that help us do that stuff, just to make sure we don't go straight over people's heads. So, Tony?
Yeah, I don't have the rest of the agenda in front of me, but there were a couple recommendations and issues from the subcommittee that I don't think have been resolved. At least if they have, I don't understand what is happening next with the protocol recommendations. Is it going back to the subcommittee? Are we discussing it more next month? Is it both? And then there was also the recommendation about the openness of the subcommittee meetings. So I just want to make sure we address those and everybody's clear before we sign off tonight.
Okay, I'm going to throw it back to Ken and he can give me his 2 cents on where he thinks we are on those, both on the protocol and the openness of the meetings. Ken, you got another quarter?
I guess, yeah, the reason we would go back to the COG would be is if this group had any objections to an open meeting like we had. We don't think we're going to be in a position to record them, but we can announce them ahead of time and handle it just like we handled this last meeting today. And as long as there's no objections, then I think that silence is approval on that one. The other one, I think we do need to have another meeting and work with MPART on that, bring that back to the next COG meeting. But what I promise I'll be doing is I'll be listening in on all of the future meetings, because there's probably another 10 or 12 between now and the next COG meeting.
If you're going to keep up with me, Ken, you're in trouble.
That's every single day, but and I will, I'll continue to make suggestions. But again, sense of urgency, it's better to err on the side of letting people know. And I know Sue has got some great ideas to help that come to fruition. So, Tony, I'd like to say, hey, we're going to ask them to mail out everything every time to people within a mile radius, but that's not practical at this point until we do a little more research. But we can't delay. And I'll just say that in May of last year, because I went back and I listened to all of the COG meetings on the recordings. In May of last year, my very last statement was, we don't want to read about these things in the paper. We need to be knowing about them ahead of time. And then up pops what happened in the Traverse City area. Something else happened similar to that in Pellston. So it was just getting a little bit annoying to see those delays. And I don't think we're going to see that kind of delay. But again,
Yeah.
Time is not our friend on this because we've got people potentially drinking contaminated water.
Yeah. That's exactly exactly right, Ken. So I want to expand on that a little bit. I would say, listening to you guys, it sounds like Kelly can go ahead and put this, give us more time for more discussion for the, what does that new protocol look like for advanced notification? What does that look like? I want you guys to flesh that out a little bit, but then on what I can promise you is on the MPART side of it, I'm going to have my staff going back and also saying, okay, we can make improvements here, here, and here. We could tweak this so that, we can do notifications, or that so we're doing notifications into certain areas based on what looks to be an apparent risk. Those are the kinds of things I want to explore more on my end. And we've started that, but I think next month we'll have more to present to you guys on how we've done that in what situations. So I think both, if you guys come back and talk more about it next month, we can talk also on our side and bring some ideas and thoughts that we're having. But given that, this is only day 13 of my new job, I'm hoping to get a little bit of grace and get me one more month to get this all up and running. So
I was just going to give you 2 weeks, and that's tomorrow.
Okay.
Now, one other thing that I picked up on listening to those meetings was when that grant came out for the airports to test and do what they were going to do. It was mentioned that all that grant money hadn't been used yet. And I'm thinking in a situation like that, so it's hindsight, but could not have some of that grant money been carved out to help provide information to the public around airports?
There were two phases of the airport grants, and so it was all given out, and so it was spread over 19 different airports. Okay. 19 different airports got the grant funding to do PFAS investigation. And so, but they didn't all start at once. So some of them haven't started any investigation. Some of them are already underway and have first rounds or whatever of data. So that's the process that we're working on. But those grants went through MDOT. So we're working with MDOT Aeronautic Division and Eagle are working very closely together on the actual technical parts of it. But then we're also bringing in data. This is why the MPART process itself is so critical. We can't, I'm looking at the teamwork slide here. We can't do this except through the MPART process of having that collaboration. So, but I will, we're going to continue to collaborate. I've got a couple more big meetings with my staff, and we're going to continue to look for ways to make process improvements so that notification piece can get put in there. We can talk more about it next month, but Kelly will put it on the agenda. I got 2 more hands, and then I think we're going to start wrapping her up. So Sandy?
This will be really quick. I'm just trying to figure out the next step on this. So you guys at Eagle are going to come up with some thoughts and ideas of what you're going to do differently. Then is the subgroup going to meet again a couple more times before the next meeting? Is it going to be all of the COG? How are we looking at that? Who's going to arrange that? How are we going to organize that? I just don't want to lose this piece. And maybe it's been said and I'm just kind of not thinking good right now.
I think that's up to you guys as a subcommittee. Kelly is happy. I'll speak for Kelly. She's not speaking up herself, so I'll speak for Kelly. She's happy to send out the calendar appointments and the Teams meetings so that you guys have that to meet by. But if you tell her how often,
so it will be part of the subcommittee.
If you want, or I guess it's up to you guys. If you
let's decide tonight.
Okay. Ken, I think that's up to your group then to make a decision if we want to do another meeting. Normally we would have another meeting right before this meeting in a month. So
yeah, I would
do in 2 weeks.
I would say that we at at this point probably need at least one work session between now and that meeting, because you saw how the meeting went tonight. It's just a recommendation meeting at that point. We put the legwork in. So I would like to have the subcommittee just send me their thoughts in an email, and then whatever we decide to schedule, we will make sure it's public.
Yeah. Yeah, why don't we just pick out 2 weeks from now? So Kelly, what would, halfway in between the COG and tonight, next meeting is?
I'll do a doodle poll, just like we did the last one, Ken. I'll set up a couple dates and I'll send that to you, Ken, and then you can distribute it as appropriate, since you're the lead of that work group, and then I will schedule the meeting with whatever your subcommittee decides.
Okay.
Okay.
Perfect. Lynn?
I guess too, I would like clarification. And again, I don't know all the protocols. I'm not always, I don't know the whole process, but is there any reason why we couldn't have a special COG meeting to just address this issue, to just to let the subcommittee meet? And then, I don't know, do we put this up to a vote? I don't know as if anybody who is a COG citizen member would not want there to be notification made at the time of. And isn't there a way you can do a survey and get, because we don't have time to hear everybody, but I would guess 90%, if not more, of the citizens would say, yes, let's do it. Let's make a decision and vote on it. Let's make the subcommittee make a recommendation, and let's at least get this first step going, which is we recommend to MPART that you start this and you start it on no later than this. Here's our recommendation, so that we're moving somewhere and not just putting it out there. I don't understand, how we got to be nimble, I guess. How do we be nimble within all the confines of this? That's the question.
I think it's a great question. Lynn. And yeah, I'm assuming right now that a good majority, 3/4 of next meeting will be just on this topic, so that you guys have adequate time to really hash it out. And, we come with, I think I'm kind of envisioning where you guys are going. So I'm kind of thinking about a couple of mock-ups in my mind of what that might look like for putting it down as a process flow. And maybe we can go from there and have somewhere to start.
But can't we make a decision? Can we, do we need 2 months? Do we need to meet in a month and then a month later say, yeah, we all agree with this? That's all I'm saying. That's my question.
Well, what would you all be agreeing with?
That the subcommittee recommends that we change this policy so that communities know right away if there's an investigation that's going to happen. They're notified. They're notified at the same time that the that the airport or the Air Force place or the company is notified. They're notified at the same time. So that part seems pretty simple. Yeah. And so I don't know whether you could do a poll or survey amongst all of us in the meantime. If anybody doesn't object it, why can't we in unison sort of say, yeah, we think this needs to happen, and we think it needs.
I think for me, Lynn, the question is what does that mean? How far? 5 miles, 1 mile, a block?
Yeah.
Municipal water, not?
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Well,
so.
And I think that's the thing is,
well,
I don't think
the initial press release doesn't have to include a distance or even actions to be taken. There's value in just being notified that there's an investigation, and how far that's going to ultimately cover. That's part of the development of the investigation. But I don't think we should wait months for the especially if it's a responsible party that's formulating the investigation, wait months to find out about it. I think that trigger needn't include all those details, but that those details should be included in follow-ups. And that I think would be worthwhile to have further entire COG discussion. And if we can't complete that in the expanded time we have our next meeting, I think that Lynn's idea of having a separate full meeting for those that are interested may be beneficial, so we're not delaying it too much longer.
Okay. And I think, just so you guys understand, on our end, you guys can make those formal recommendations. I've heard you, I'm doing to start working on process improvements on our end too. So it's not a delay. I think we're working at it. You're working at it from the front end. I'm working at it from the back end. And hopefully by the time we all get to what does this really look like, we're almost, we both worked at it from different angles to attack this particular issue. So, all right, I'm going to go through the hands because I think it is 7:51 and I really want to put a firm stop at 8 if we can. So, Tony, you are next with your hand up.
Thank you. 2 questions. So for the next subcommittee meeting, which I understand is about 2 weeks from now, is it my understanding that it will be posted on the calendar and that there will also be a notice sent around to the people on the COG distribution list?
Yes. Okay. Yes. And it will be on the COG calendar. There's 2 calendars on the MPART website. One is the main MPART website, but there's actually a COG calendar under the Citizens Advisory Work Group. So look for it under there.
Okay.
Oh, Kelly's going to show you right now. There is the meeting calendar for the COG. So you've got all your links right there. So that'll be good. And then, yeah, we'll give it, if you guys want to take the whole meeting, we can take the whole meeting next month and make sure we get through this issue. Because I think it's important. So, all right, Tony, anything else?
No, I think taking the whole meeting is a good idea. And I appreciate the notice that'll be sent out by email as well. Thank you.
Okay. Great. Charlie, you're up next.
Okay, Abby, can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, great. As I've been listening to the conversation, I guess I have a concern, and it may just be the nature of what we're dealing with. But the group is purely advisory to Eagle. And, there's been a general recommendation put forward, and I'm sensing that the group is getting some pushback and is getting pushed to develop details and getting pushed into the weeds. And I'm not sure, that may be absolutely the right thing, and it may be absolutely the wrong thing. But I just wanted to put that out there. I don't know for discussion, but just my reflection on what I'm hearing. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Charlie. The other thing, oops, hold on. Ken, before I take your comment, I saw that Sherry had a clarification question. She wanted to know, will the full COG or the subcommittee continue to flesh out the communication protocol that's under discussion, and when would this happen? That would be a yes. That would, both the subcommittee would work on it as well as it will come back to the full COG for next meeting, and we'll continue to work that out. So I think that would be good. Okay. And so, yep, Dan Brown is also saying, I agree with AJ, the press release initial notification just needs to say there's an investigation going forward to learn more. And yep, that's one of those that we can do. So hands, I still see, Ken, your hand is still up. You still got a question?
Not a question. What I'm going to suggest is that I'm going to make an executive decision that we, in 2 weeks, have a meeting. It'll be titled as a subcommittee meeting, but it'll be open to the entire COG, and we'll go through all of those issues that we can present to you at the next full meeting, just to save some time, because I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of us that are going to have concerns with having this notification go out as soon as an investigation starts. So does that clarify that for everybody? And I'll ask Kelly, of course, to post that as a meeting, so we won't need a doodle poll.
Yeah, so it would be on another Tuesday night then? That's what you're
Yeah,
thinking?
Tuesday, 2 weeks from, 2 weeks from tonight, Tuesday night, work session, and there'll be one agenda item.
Okay. So that would take us to the 27th, and that's just one lucky day there, Ken. I don't have a town hall on that meeting day yet, so.
Well, that's also another lucky day because it's the day after my 52nd wedding anniversary.
As long as you
I
don't
didn't
forget
pick
it.
the wrong night.
So, okay, here's the things that we were thinking about putting on the May 11th preview. Apparently at one of the other meetings, there was some discussion about the PFAS and COVID, and Dr. Jennifer McDonald and Dr. Savitz were looking at potentially coming if you guys wanted them to. We also had Tammy Nokum that was still talking about presenting for ecological studies, and John Ash was going to do like a GIS application update, but all of that is not set in stone, and it can easily be pushed back another month or to a later date when you guys want, because I think what I'm hearing from the group is that this is the most important thing we've got on our agenda, and we want to take the whole next meeting to make sure we tackle it. So, okay. Ken, any other thoughts on your end, since you're in charge of this this big subgroup?
I'm asking everybody that's available to come, and I do want some good inputs. If you can't make the meetings, please send input via email or call me.
That is good thoughts. So, okay, 7:57. Kelly or Amy, any last thoughts before we jump off and give everybody their night back?
No, I will get that meeting scheduled. I don't know, probably won't come tonight yet. My kiddos are lurking, but I'll get it out tomorrow for sure.
Okay. I think that's a bonus. All right. Bill Barnett, you got something that takes 1 minute or less?
If it would be okay, I'd like to say something.
Sure, go for it.
There was a bipartisan coalition that failed last year at the federal level to have PFAS drinking water standards set at the federal level. And today, Representatives Debbie Dingell and Fred Upton, it's bipartisan, introduced a PFAS Action Act. They're coming back and going to give it another shot. So hopefully your state group will have some assistance at the federal level very soon, or at least it's back up as a possibility. So I'd ask everybody to please support Dingell and Upton and talk to your representatives, and that would be an action item that we could all help with and support, because we need these levels set not only at the state but at the federal level as well. And I wanted everybody to know that happened today, Tuesday, and hopefully that's within your 50 seconds. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Bill. I think that was definitely my 50 seconds. Perfect. Great update. I hadn't heard that one, so I appreciate that. That's good news. Good news. And I think, like I said before, the reason that this continues to get national attention, and especially coming out from Michigan as a leader, is because of you guys. It's because of the groundwork that you guys do every day in your communities, and how we continue to work towards those goals and solutions for our state, because this is a long-term issue. Getting PFAS out of our ecosystem, out of our fish, out of our water is a long-term, and it's going to be here for a lot of days unless we can come up with some pretty innovative solutions. So, all right, everybody, it's 8 o'clock. Go put your jammies on, tuck your kiddos in bed, and enjoy your night. I will catch up with you in 2 weeks. Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Abby.